Hi, this is Jonathan Lehman.
This is Mark Dever.
Welcome to this episode of 9 Marks Pastors Talk. 9 Marks exists to help pastors
For the glory of God.
do what? Do you know?
Lead their churches well.
Build healthy churches.
Yeah. That's what it means to lead
For the
them.
glory of God. Learn more at
9 marks / pay for this.
9marks.org. If you want to give,
/
if you want to help, /talk. 9marks.org / talk, I think is the, and you're so helpful. I really appreciate it.
We have a special guest with us.
We
Let's
do.
get on to that.
Matt Giralt. Giralt.
Giralt.
Yes.
Matt
Giralt.
Giralt. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Presently, you're an intern with Mark Dever.
Yes.
Before that, you were doing what?
Before that, I was a pastor for about 10 years in the east of France.
And the name of your church?
Action Biblique Etup.
In which city?
Etup.
Oh, Etup. Okay.
Etup is the name of the city. The church
And where in
is in.
France is that?
So it's on the eastern border near Switzerland.
Uh-huh. And you grew up there or where?
No, I grew up in the southwest of France near Bordeaux. You do know Bordeaux because of the wine,
Sure.
I think. Yeah.
And the goal of this conversation is to hear a little bit about Christianity in France, as well as your own personal experience of that. But just backtracking on you a little bit further, your parents are Christians or no?
My parents are Christians, yes.
And that would be pretty unusual in France, yes?
Yeah, kind of. When I grew up, I was the only or one of 2 Christians in the school.
Uh-huh.
So usually people,
A school of how many kids?
yeah. How many would be? 200.
Okay, you're one of 2 kids who grew up in a Christian
And when
home.
you say Christian, you don't mean Roman Catholic?
No, I mean Christian converted,
Born again.
born again Christian.
How many of the
Trusting
kids
in
out of
Christ.
200 would be Roman Catholic?
When I grew up, so that would be between 40 and 30 years ago, about 70% of France would consider themselves to be Catholic. Now
That's
it's
probably
down
lower,
to
right?
30%.
30%.
30?
From
Yeah.
70 in a generation.
In 30 years, yeah.
Wow. Okay, I want to pause on your timeline and jump to like France as a whole. I know it's a little silly asking one guy to speak for all of France, but sort of the largest level, the religious milieu, and then Christian specifically. How would you characterize the religious milieu of France? Mostly secular. You already said 30% Roman Catholic. Is that all nominal? Just in general, how would you describe the nation for us?
France is really secular. And when you look at the past 50, 30 years, been secularized really fast. Now the growest or the most, the biggest religion would be non-religion, would be 50% of the population.
Would you say, I'm nothing?
From this 50%, half of them would say I'm atheist, and convinced atheist. Half of them would be non-religious but spiritual, open people. So 50% of the population say they don't believe in nothing. And then you have 30% of Catholicism, 10% of Islam, and then around 3% of Protestantism. And in that, it would be roughly half and half liberal Protestantism and evangelicals.
So you're guessing about 1.5% of the country would be what you and I identify as Christian.
Yeah, roughly about 1.1 million people. Yeah.
Okay.
Out of a 66 million country, or 68.
Mark, I feel like I've heard you talk about the difference between European countries that were historically Protestant versus ones that were the Reformation never showed up. To what extent would you assume that is why France is the way it is today, that the Reformation never came there?
You look at a map of Europe, of Western Europe, the northern countries are Lutheran or Anglican. The southern countries are Roman Catholic or over in Greece, Greek Orthodox. And the Reformation literally never happened there. The middle band of countries, they're interesting. They're countries of conflict religiously. So 450 years ago, France was very nearly Protestant. If Henry had not said Paris is worth a mass, if he had kept to his convictions, the Reformation by the late 16th century was not dominant in France, but it was probably as cognitively dominant in France as it was in England. Only in England it had the power of the monarchy. There were many, many French Protestants. I mean, Jean Calvin, Geneva. I mean, the power of the revolution of religion in France was strong. And down in the south, where you're from, Bordeaux, that was a more Protestant. Protestantism got further down there.
Yeah, especially in La Rochelle.
Yeah. The famous Huguenots, who in the late 1500s were basically thrown out. Spurgeon comes from a Huguenot line that came over to East Anglia in fleeing. So since then, it's been pretty dark. But then France has gone its own way because it's not been a normal Roman Catholic country because it's in the French Revolution, they were rebelling against the Roman Catholic Church as much as anything, as much as the monarchy. They saw the Roman Catholic Church as part of the oppressive. It was kind of like an early Marxism in that sense. It was atheistic. It was rationalistic. So France just has such a mixed career. But anyway, what that means is it surprises Americans to realize that there are hundreds of evangelical churches in France.
Yeah, we estimate around 2,700 evangelical.
2,700.
Yeah.
Thousands of evangelical churches in France.
Yeah.
That would teach the same gospel you would preach.
Yeah, I would say so about this 2,700. Mainly, yes.
And they're concentrated in the north, in cities. And where do we find these churches?
Oh, they're pretty...
In the east?
Oh, there are big pockets.
Okay, cities?
Yeah, cities, most definitely Paris, east of France, where historically you have Protestants, but also Mennonites in the east of France. And then in the southwest or the center of France, not so many, but again, not so many inhabitants. So
now, when I asked you if you'd preach the same gospel as you preach, you paused. You're not convinced. Is there a lot?
Well, you have the liberal Protestant churches. So
well,
we're not thinking about those.
He's talking about the evangelical
yeah,
churches.
I was thinking, so about the liberal Protestantism, I would say they don't preach the gospel.
Yeah,
so that's
sure,
clear.
right,
and they surely must be dying off more quickly than the evangelicals.
They are.
What's happening to their buildings?
That's a good question. Mostly they've been they stay to the church, but they're empty.
Yeah, they've got an endowment that takes care of them or something. Yeah.
For the rest of, for evangelical churches, I would say that most of them preach the gospel. Mm-hmm. Some of them don't. For example, the biggest church, evangelical church, considered evangelical in France, is about 12,000, 14,000 members in Paris.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge by American standards.
Yeah, and that's the biggest in France. We have about 6 mega churches in France, I think. So
and by mega, you mean over 2,000?
Over 2,000, yes.
Okay. And your church is like 200?
Yeah, we have 170 members and 230 attendees. On
Which
Sunday
itself
morning.
makes it an unusually large church among Protestant churches in attendance.
Oh, yeah. And especially among conservative evangelicals.
Right.
Okay, so I moved to Paris. I'm looking for a church.
Yeah.
Do I go to this 12,000 member church? Will I be well nourished and well fed and encouraged in the gospel?
Definitely don't do that. This church, in fact, has been called out by, at the time, the president of National Evangelical Council to be a prosperity church.
I see.
So this one is clear.
Okay, remove that one. I moved to Paris. I'm looking for a healthy church where I can be a member and live life with these people and be encouraged in the gospel and preaching the whole counsel of God. How hard is it going to be for me to find that church in Paris?
Not so hard, depending on the neighborhood. There are some neighborhoods, there are no churches, evangelical churches. The richest one, actually. So the most rich is the neighborhood, the less evangelical churches you would find. But other than that, the easiest way would be to go. We have the Evangelical National Council as a website that lists all the churches.
Would that website have 2,000 or 2,500 churches on it?
Yeah.
So of those churches, how many of them would have full-time pastors?
Oof, that's a good question. I don't know. But what we know is that in the next 7 years, we will lack between 600 and 1,000 pastors. So pastors who actually are pastoring and are not going to get replaced.
So all the guys my age,
for example.
There's nobody to replace them.
Yeah.
What happened to the guys your age?
The thing is, if you talk to any pastor in France or many pastors in France, they would say that we have a gap, a void between 40 and 55. Above that, above 55, we have faithful men, leaders, elders, pastors. And if you go under 35, you have young, faithful, hungry members.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But
the meeting I was at with you in Grenoble a couple of years ago, with like 90 pastors from around the French-speaking world,
90,
that was encouraging.
Yeah.
They were mainly younger.
Yeah, really encouraging. And we are encouraged. I mean, if we look the past 10 years, a lot of young Christian, faithful Christian want to be pastors. So that's really encouraging.
Do the churches in France think much of taking the gospel elsewhere in the French-speaking world? Switzerland?
I was about to ask the same thing.
Belgium? West Africa? The Caribbean? Quebec?
Most definitely from France to Africa because of the history. I would say that between France and Switzerland or France and Belgium, there is no formal connection.
So do the churches think about missions in those French-speaking places?
No, we wouldn't think about mission. When we think about mission, we wouldn't think about Switzerland or Belgium. Yeah. We would definitely think about Africa.
Or Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Okay, 2,700 quote-unquote evangelical churches. I'm picturing in my mind the numbers going down as I get more specific, right, on the little flip number thing. Okay, now let's go to Reformed. How many of those would be Reformed churches? And then I'm going to add Baptist, and then I'm going to add Complementarian. And do the numbers keep dropping, and how low do they go when I get all three of those?
Yeah, that's really hard to estimate because if you say reform, I understand what that's mean. If you say reform in France, it means liberal Protestantism. So
okay, I was just in the Netherlands, and the Dutch Reformed their churches a lot of.
So if you say reform, the doctrine of grace.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, I know. I would say historically, most churches don't embrace the doctrine of grace as we understand them. Yeah.
You're Reformed?
I am.
You're Baptist?
I am.
You're Complementarian?
I am.
How many other churches believe what you believe? 5, 10, 20, 100? Give me a ballpark.
I would say a few hundreds. A few hundreds.
Okay.
So more than 10%.
Yeah.
I realize you're guessing.
Yeah, a little more, I would say. Not that many. Not a lot, but about this number.
Okay, now I want to zero in even closer into you and your pastorate and your church over the last 10 years, having people come into your church and what you're encountering from them. So they're walking in and you preach expositionally?
Yes.
And are they used to that? Is that a new thing for them? And how do they respond to expositional preaching?
So the people who would come to the church, they would come because they were invited. Sure. We are not in the city, so you just don't pop up to the church. So someone would have invited you to the church. And usually...
So the way you've seen visitors happen here would not happen in the same way in your church?
No, not in my church. In other churches, in Grenoble, for example, or even in Bordeaux, in my church, that would be the case. But not in Ethiopia. Usually people don't They don't know nothing about Christianity, religion, the Bible, the gospel.
Wow.
So the first question for them is usually, tell me the difference between Catholicism and your religion. So
yeah, okay, that makes
they
sense.
go a long way.
Because they have some cultural knowledge of what Roman Catholicism is.
Yeah, and the thing is, when they go into a evangelical church, they're really surprised because it's lively, we are
Different,
friendly, and the only thing they experience in their life is either baptism, baby baptism in Catholic Church, or a funeral.
Right.
That's the only time you go to church in France.
So these people, on the whole, your average fellow French citizen is probably fairly secular, but they still have a nominal Catholic understanding, hangover, hauntedness.
Yeah, but
that they bring with them that you have to respond to.
Yeah, but I would say that goes away more and more. When I was in school, when I was a kid, most of the kids would say either their parents are Catholic or they are Catholic. And they would say, when I was, 10, they would say, oh, I'm a Catholic, but I'm not practicing. That was Catholic, not practicing. But no, they wouldn't say they're Catholic. Nobody say that anymore. So some of them would know from their parents about Catholicism, never went to church. I mean, maybe their parents went for Easter or Christmas, and that's it. But guys my age never went to church.
How do you see people responding, Christian and non-Christian, coming into your church, responding to expositional preaching?
They love it. I mean, they love it most of the time because they're like, oh, you're helping me understand the Bible.
Yeah.
I never understood the Bible, and they weren't aware that was possible. Just open the Bible, read it, and understand it. And the idea of God is speaking to me through the Bible, I mean, that's amazing for us.
Yeah, right.
And for them. And so when they come and they understand what they read, it's like, oh, and now maybe that means that I can read it too and understand it.
What was the last series you did before you came over here?
We began John.
Okay.
Yeah.
You began. So you're going to be like Calvin? You're going to go back and pick up right where you left off when you left Geneva?
Yeah, it's been going since while I was here.
Oh, okay,
so
the guys
I will
there.
pick it up.
They've been preaching without you in the same series. I guess.
Okay. Got it. All right. What about meaningful membership and discipline?
Wow.
Pretty unusual there. And then how do folk respond to it when they show up in your church, if they're coming from other churches? Do you practice church discipline?
Yes, we do. That's pretty unusual to practice church discipline in churches in France. And meaningful membership is unusual too. And France is pretty unusual about membership because we are the layer of law, of Republican law, because of the separation in 1905 between church and state. I mean, the French Republic is laïque, which means that, for example, if you want to get married, you have to get married at the mayor's office. You don't get married in churches. If you're a political person, you cannot talk about religion or show any religious sign. So that's a thing. So membership in a church in France is an association. That's the legal form. Right. So to be a member of the church, you have to be a member of the association.
I see.
So in France, church members associate membership to legal stuff.
I see.
So that takes work to say, no, we're not talking about...
You have to disentangle their understanding from all of that.
You have to...
There's a covenant community commitment to one another.
Yeah. But once they understand that, and if you say, in fact, membership is not... yes, it's formal. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's important. No, it's not administrative. It's just taking care one of another and be responsible for others and be accountable to others. And once this is understood, I mean, people love the fact that, yes, I will be taken care of. Sometimes it takes more work to say, that means also that you have to take care of other people.
Yeah.
And sometimes say things that are not easy to say. But I mean, when this is understood, people love it. Same with discipline. They don't like the idea of discipline. Maybe this is frightening for them. But once they understand that it is a way to care for the people, care for the church, care for the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
Once they understand that, I mean, the biggest problem would be, okay, now how we do that?
Can you recall a time when you guys practiced discipline, and did it go well or not well? Or
I can think of maybe 3 instances of discipline, almost 4, in my church since I'm here, and it was egregious, obvious, open sin. That wasn't a problem. But if we were to take disciplinary actions towards a divisive member, I think that would be more difficult to do.
Yeah, no, that is often harder to judge and demonstrate and so forth. So you decided to come and do the internship, and your church graciously gave you 4 months, 5 months off?
5 months,
5
yes.
months off?
Yeah.
And they say, we'll cover the pulpit, go learn, come back, and you're going to go back to your same church?
Yeah, I will.
And just kind of pick up where you left off?
Yes.
What's been helpful about the internship?
Wow, a lot of things. I mean, mainly the life of the church. I have read not all the books, but many books. So I reread them. That's good. But to come here and to leave the church and to see, okay, these guys, they don't just write books, they pastor churches.
Mm.
And actually what they write about is
What they're doing.
So that's good.
Yeah.
And to see that, to be a member of the church, to sit under the preaching of the church, to be taken care of by the members. I mean, that has been wonderful. Any
new ideas that have occurred to you that you've learned? Or is it just kind of a reinforcement of the things you were already?
Mainly reinforcements. Some, not the big ideas, but some ideas are new. But I would say that the most helpful things are, the thing I love the most is the church covenant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea. I love how we do it when we stand and read it together.
Have you looked at the history of the uses of covenants in France, in French churches?
I'm not familiar about that, and I have never seen that before coming here 2 years ago.
Your church doesn't have a church covenant?
No, we don't for now.
For now.
Sounds like they will.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Anything else from you, Mark?
Well, I mean, it's heartbreaking to think of hundreds of churches that need pastors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your church, as a pretty active church, doing to help supply that need? I think my church is very generous in the way they think about my ministry, and in the way I'm involved in things beyond my church. One thing we do locally is have interns. We had interns and we will have interns. One of the things is we started a pastors conference 2 years ago. You were there. You will be here in June. And we plan to have a pastors conference every 2 years on ecclesiology and continue to produce resources to equip churches, leaders. And our goal is to form a network of like-minded pastors to encourage each other, to have interns and produce resources together.
Quite a bit of the 9 Marks resources have been translated into French, right?
Yeah, in part because of Quebec.
Yeah, thanks to the work of Daniel Anderson.
Yeah. Well, brother, thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm glad you've been here at the church and in the internship program. I look forward to spending more time with you in June.
Yeah.
I was just in Netherlands, and it was so encouraging. And I understand it's a different situation and different context, but what you have is this budding, growing desire among a small, growing to medium-sized number of churches and pastors who are discovering expositional preaching and meaningful membership and biblical understanding of conversion and evangelism and discipleship, and they're hungry for more. And it was so exciting to be there and be a part of, hey, feed on this, try this. And they're like, yes, give me more. And my guess is it's probably similar among the circle of churches that you've been a part of, and you guys are trying to help encourage through your conferences and so forth.
Yeah, we are thinking that too.
Yeah. So anyhow, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
For more articles, books, and podcasts, please visit 9marks.org.